Let's recap the latest in the Gaza war. Israeli airstrikes have killed at least 2,670 Palestinians since last Saturday. At least a quarter of them were children. The Israeli military has killed more Palestinians in 8 days than it did in 51 days of war on Gaza in 2014. The number of Israelis killed in Hamas's military operation stands at 1,400, including 289 soldiers. Israel has ordered 1.1 million Palestinians in northern Gaza to move south as the military prepares for a wide-ranging land, air and sea invasion. Meanwhile, Iran's foreign minister has told Al Jazeera that his country will not remain an observer in the ongoing conflict between Israel and Gaza. Well, Gregory Gause is a professor of international relations at Texas A&M University. He joins us from Lewes, Delaware. Thank you very much for being on Al Jazeera. First of all, I want to talk about Antony Blinken's, tour of the Gulf states before he heads back to Israel. He said that he's got three aims at this point in time: to get humanitarian aid into Gaza, to get the captives released by Hamas, and to ensure that this conflict doesn't spread to other areas. Hasn't been able to achieve any of those at this point in time. What do you make of his, his efforts, his diplomatic efforts over the last 8 days?
I think the more important thing going forward, not to say that the fate of hostages are unimportant or humanitarian aid, but humanitarian aid is not going to be delivered into a war zone. I think that the question going forward is what happens the day after the Israeli attacks stop. And I think that there's no good answer to that. But I assume that Secretary Blinken is speaking to the Gulf leaders about U.S. thoughts about what happens the day after. The other thing, of course, that they're speaking about, I'm sure, is Iran. The Gulf countries have, even Saudi Arabia, I think, has better avenues to speak to the Iranians now than the United States does. And I think that Secretary Blinken is asking them to reaffirm the American public message to the Iranians not to escalate the crisis.
But as you say that, in the last few hours, the foreign minister from Iran has said that his country will not remain an observer in the ongoing conflict. And if the scope of this conflict widens, heavy losses will be inflicted on the US.
I think that this is a time when the Iranians are enjoying a lot of big talk. They're attempting to rally support for their position, and they are directly involved in this crisis already, of course, given their relations with Hamas, given their relations with Hezbollah. But I wonder if that big talk masks more caution on their part. As we can see, at least so far, Hezbollah has been relatively restrained in its activities on the northern Israeli border. And I think that the Iranians would be courting a serious escalation with the United States, given the way American sentiments are moving right now, if they were to take any kind of direct action.
Now, we know Antony Blinken is heading to Israel tomorrow. What will his message be for Netanyahu after visiting all of these Gulf states?
I'm sure that the message that he's hearing from the Gulf leaders is that while the Gulf leaders understand that there has to be a response against Hamas, that there's no justification for the casualties to civilians. There's no justification for the extent of the retribution from Israel on the civilian population of Gaza, and that will make it extremely difficult for the Gulf countries, many of whom have either established diplomatic relations with Israel, or in the case of Saudi Arabia, we're negotiating on that question, to be able to move forward with relations with Israel. And I'm sure that the Israelis will want to know from Blinken what the Gulf countries have said about what happens in that situation the day after the Israelis decide to stop this invasion.
Yeah. 2,600 civilians have already died in Gaza. What kind of pressure can Blinken put on Netanyahu to ensure that number doesn't continue to grow out of control?
I think he has to emphasize to Blinken that Netanyahu's entire regional strategy, which was to try to establish normal relations with as many Arab states as possible while not dealing with the fundamental basic issue of the Palestinians, is not tenable in this situation. and that he is going to have to modulate the Israeli response if he wants to get back to that strategy of attempting to increase Israel's contacts in the Arab world.
Thank you so much. We really do appreciate your time. That is Gregory Gause, Professor of International Relations at Texas A&M University. Thanks so much.
Certainly.